Hi, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. It is 1:30, and we have a virtual audience, so we want to start on time so we can end on time. My name is Michelle Whitcup. I'm the Vice President of Research Strategy at NHF, and I'd like to welcome you all to our session, You Can Impact the Future of the Inherited Bleeding Disorder Community, the National Research Blueprint. Welcome, everybody. I see some familiar faces from people who have been working on the blueprint, so we appreciate that. Today we have Kevin Mills, who is our Chief Science Officer, who will start us out, and then Esmeralda Vasquez, who has been our SME, and we are now we don't refer to people as patients, we refer to them as subject matter experts. Those of you who are affected with a bleeding disorder or live with somebody who is affected with a bleeding disorder are experts in your own personal journey, and as such should be referred to as a subject matter expert. We have subject matter experts in health care, our physicians, our nurses, they're all subject matter experts in their own niche. And you are subject matter experts in your particular area of your personal journey. So we identify you as such, and the acronym that we tend to use is SMEs. So you'll hear that frequently as we talk through the Bleeding Disorder Conference. And then we'll have a panel discussion at the end where we hope that you'll ask any questions, any clarifications, anything that you need. Our audience, our virtual audience, please feel free to submit any questions that you might have also. We have people who have been working on our blueprint who are present, and if for some reason our panel can't answer any questions, we'll draw from the audience too. So with that, I'm going to open this up to Dr. Mills and have him come up and join us. Kevin?
Thank you, Michelle. That was good timing because I saw Randy Curtis walk in and that gave you the chance to run away so from the table. No, thank you for that, for the introduction, and welcome everyone to the session on the National Research Blueprint. I'm excited to have the chance to talk about some of the work that we're doing together, really with the community, with you all and others, to really change the research paradigm, to really make really dramatic new progress towards the development of new treatments, new cures, diagnoses, the things that you, the community, have defined as critical needs from the research enterprise. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and talk a little bit about sort of where we were, how we got to where we are, and where we think we're going. So I always start these talks with our mission, with the NHF mission. And that mission is really built on three pillars of research, education, and advocacy to enable people who are living with inheritable blood disorders and bleeding disorders and their families to thrive. So one of those pillars is research. Today's research is going to bring about tomorrow's treatments. And so, what I'm going to talk about is that research pillar. The vision, for NHF is we envision a future world without inheritable bleeding disorders. And I would argue that vision begins with research, right? That future vision really begins with the research and the science and the investigation that's happening today. So we have some guiding principles as we're thinking about the National Research Blueprint. And I'll talk about the journey to the development of that blueprint. But, I wanted to start with sort of our North Star at NHF and within the research department at NHF. Our guiding principle is really that we want to transform the research paradigm. We want to transform the way research is done and the way that it serves the community. We want to transform it in such a way that the research that's happening, the science that's happening, the discoveries that are coming out of the laboratories are not just for the community, but they're by the community, they're with the community. That the work that's getting done is informed by you, the subject matter experts, in order to deliver the results that the community really needs. And I think it's important that we have that feedback. And Michelle talked a bit about, this notion of subject matter experts, because I think it's incumbent upon us to ensure that the science and the research serves the needs of everyone, right? Everyone with an inheritable bleeding disorder, their families. In order to reach that vision and to fulfill that mission, we need the research to serve people. And to do that, we need to know what's needed. So I think that Michelle talked a little bit about this concept of redefining what a subject matter expert means. And I think if we want to develop a research paradigm and a research blueprint and a research process that best serves the community, then it is really important that we redefine the definition of an expert. And I think we tend to think about subject matter experts in a narrow way, and we think about them as technical experts, right? The people who have some technical expertise or mastery or deep education in a particular field of study. And I think we really need to upend that definition, just as Michelle was talking about, and define the subject matter expert as those individuals who are living with inheritable bleeding disorders. And that doesn't just include patients, that also includes caregivers, families, friends, loved ones, the people who have a living experience with a blood disorder are really the ones that are the true subject matter experts in the subject of living your life with the disorder. And no one has that expertise other than those who live it. And that expertise is what needs to be the driving force behind the research that gets done in service of the community. So, I'm oftentimes asked, what do I know about research? When we sort of provide that definition of subject matter expert, what do I know about research? And I think the answer is that you know everything that you need to know about your daily experience with your bleeding disorder. And it's critical that the scientists, the researchers, the laboratory people, the physicians hear about that experience, because it's that experience, it's that lived experience that really drives the research that needs to happen. A lot of times I say, scientists like myself, I'm one of those technical experts, are very good at devising questions that they can ask, coming up with experiments that can be done. But without feedback from the community, we are not very good at coming up with the questions that should be asked and developing the experiments that must be done. And so it's really critical that we hear back from the community, from the subject matter experts, because you know everything you need to know about research. Research needs to serve your needs. So with that in mind, we have embarked upon a community-driven process to develop a national research blueprint. And I'll talk a little bit about sort of the motivation for that and how we got to where we are today. The blueprint is a community-led blueprint, right? So this is going to be a roadmap for doing the critical priority research that needs to be done today. It needs to be led by the community, driven by the community, informed by the community. Its goal is really to bring together the frankly awesome research capabilities that exist in this country. There's tremendous resources, tremendous brain power, amazing research infrastructure, and we have an opportunity to bring all of that together in a concerted effort to make significant advances in hematology research. And so it's really about bringing that awesome power of research together in a coordinated fashion. The National Research Blueprint is also going to be our vehicle, our mechanism for tackling the most important scientific questions, the most important research questions that were defined by you, the community, by the subject matter experts. Those priorities were collected with community input over the course of nearly 2 years, and culminated in the State of the Science Research Summit that we held last year. Those research priorities are defined by the community as the most important things that research can deliver, the most important results that need to be delivered. So we want to tackle the highest priority research that's been defined by the community. It's a collaborative effort, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think one critical aspect of the blueprint for change is that we all need to work together. It's not just scientists going into the laboratory or physicians going into the clinic. It's all of us coming together, bringing our own skills, our own perspectives, our own unique capabilities to the research enterprise. And doing it in a way that ensures sustainability, right? So we want to be able to do research today that leads to treatments tomorrow. But to do that, there need to be people and resources and capabilities still available tomorrow. So we need to develop a plan that ensures long-term sustainability of research and cutting-edge medicine. And then finally, the research blueprint is really about integrating everyone in the community into the process. It's about all of us working together in order to bring about change for tomorrow. So what are the elements of the National Research Blueprint? It will be will provide an actionable plan. So this will be, taking the research priorities, which I'll talk about in a moment, that have been defined by the state of the science, and really putting an action plan around those. We're going to do X and Y and Z to really deliver results in a measurable way, right? On a measurable time frame with measurable milestones that hold us all accountable to deliver for the community. The blueprint will define critical stakeholders, roles and responsibilities. So who's going to work on what? What's the role of subject matter experts? What's the role of advocacy specialists? What's the role of our pharmaceutical partners? There will be clearly defined roles and responsibilities. I think the blueprint needs to have a way of measuring progress, right? We need to be able to assess, are we making progress in advancing research priorities? So there will be a mechanism for the measurement of progress and holding ourselves accountable to making that progress. And finally, and I think maybe most importantly, the blueprint also needs to ensure transparency and what's the word I'm looking for? Omnidirectional communication. We really want feedback from the community into the blueprint, but I think it's also incumbent upon us to ensure that we communicate back to the community what's happening. What are the advances that are coming? What are the challenges that are coming? What has your participation in the research enterprise delivered? And so the research blueprint will also be very specifically about better communication with the community. Just a few milestones along the way for our journey. So this process began a couple of years ago. In 2020, we began to gather input from the community through focus groups and listening to subject matter experts, bringing people, really bringing people into the conversation so we could hear what was most important in the community. That was followed by the creation of working groups, 6 working groups that took all of that input from the community survey, from those focus groups, from those listening sessions, and developed really the thoughtfully produced research priorities that we then presented to the community at the State of the Science Research Summit that happened about a year ago. It was last September. The next step, right, that provided us with the what, and then the next step was the how. So we had the research priorities. The next step was to develop research blueprint working groups that are now active and working, and a number of our working group members are here today, to turn all of that research prioritization into an action plan, an implementable plan. So we will have manuscripts that will be published, reporting on the state of the science in the early part of 2023. And in 23, we will also launch the action plan, the actual research blueprint, via another summit, which we will hold probably in the third quarter of next year. And there will be some additional manuscripts that come out of that. I think I summarized this, but we really felt like it was important to listen to the community. This is where it really got started. And so we held a number of listening sessions. We had participants that were drawn from sort of all different walks of life. Most importantly, subject matter experts, right? Those living with an inheritable bleeding disorder, but it also included others, pharmaceutical industry, scientists, physicians, payers as well. So we really tried to hear from the whole community about what the research needed to be done. We also gathered a broader sampling of information, a broader input using a cross-community survey. And now that information together really, led to a few learnings that were important, and sort of the bullet points that are there. I think the point I want to emphasize the most is that it is clear that we need to acknowledge and listen to and be responsive to the lived experience of individuals living with inheritable bleeding disorders. You know what you need in order to live your best life, and we need to be able to build that into our research plans. So there were 6 working groups. They were organized around different therapeutic areas, biological areas, including hemophilia, von Willebrand's disease, and other mucocutaneous disorders, rare and ultra rare disorders. There was a working group that was really focusing on women and girls and individuals with the potential to menstruate. Health equity was a critical component of the working groups, right? We recognize that there are significant equity gaps, and there's a role for research and understanding and closing those gaps, and also building inclusion and equity and diversity into the research effort itself. And there was a working group to really devise the critical infrastructure needs. Like, what is the material resources and infrastructure that we need in order to be able to launch all of this research? Those working groups then produce a number of priority research themes, and you can read those priority research themes there. Those are themes that cut across many of those different disease areas, including understanding the pathobiology of bleeding, understanding how the bleeding, how your bleeding characteristics change with aging, understanding the immune environment. In addition to those priority research themes, though, the effort of those working groups also really defined, I think, some critical core values that we will embed in the research blueprint. And those include the concept of people centricity. Research needs to be by the community, for the community, and with the community. The value of collaboration. This is a community effort. It's going to only succeed if we're all in it together. And the value of equity and inclusion in both the research and in the access to care that research produces. So then we wanted to go from the what, those research priorities, to the how, the implementation plan. So we've now formed 5 working groups. One of those is what we call a research cluster that will develop research prioritized programs based on those research priorities, develop an action plan for putting together the national research infrastructure that we need, and ensuring that there's a sustainable workforce. We also have a working group that's focusing on subject matter experts. What's the role of the subject matter experts? What do you need? How do you want to be involved? How can we involve you? There's a community engagement working group. There's an advocacy working group, and there's there's a policy group. So collectively, those 5 working groups are taking all of the research priorities that were devised in the state of the science and creating that action plan that I talked about. That action plan, first and foremost, will strive for diversity and inclusion. That plan will ensure that there's actionable implementation of the research, that we create national research infrastructure, that there's a platform that brings together those national resources upon which we can launch those research projects, that those projects are collaborative, that they're integrative, that they are by the community and for the community, and that we use our collective voice and our collective action to coordinate resources. Research is expensive, research is time consuming, and it requires many hands. And so we want to be able to coordinate those national resources to enable the researchers to do the work. Those 5 working groups are also working in a very coordinated fashion. And as I said, there are a number of representatives of our working groups here today. Those working groups interact with each other to ensure that we create an integrated research blueprint that really acknowledges the critical priorities and the critical values that I already talked about, and that's built into everything that we do. So those working groups are still working hard, developing their plans. They're meeting on a weekly basis. We will be rolling out the work from those working groups, and that will culminate in a summit that we'll do next year. But the output will look something like this, in very vague terms, that the plan will define the needs and a plan for creating national research infrastructure, which includes things like better clinical trial networks, biobanks and biorepositories. In an earlier session, Len talked about My Life, Our Future, so bringing together the data resources from efforts like that as well. All of that national research infrastructure will be by and for and supported by the critical stakeholders, which includes subject matter experts. And that will be the platform upon which prioritized research is launched, leveraging those resources to make the research more efficient, more effective, more responsive to the community. So the implementation plan will look something like that when our working groups have really completed their work. So that's enough. You've heard plenty from me. I'm going to stop right there. Because I think if there's one message that I want to leave you with, it's that the most important thing is we want to turn the research paradigm on its head and bring individuals in the community, subject matter experts, into the research effort, not just as study subject, but really as knowledge experts and drivers of the work that's being done. And so to reflect that, I want to now bring up to the stage my dear friend Esmeralda Vasquez, who will talk about her journey from patient to subject matter expert to trusted and valued colleague. So I think, you know, what she's going to have to say, I think is really, really going to resonate. So come on up.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Esmeralda. I was diagnosed with gland-Smith thrombasthenia at the age of 1. And I live in Chicago, and my parents are immigrants and they're from Mexico. I want to start talking about relationships because I feel that every change, no matter how big or how small, always begins with some sort of a relationship. We bring individuals that have a specific skill set or knowledge in a particular subject. And I think it's important to associate ourselves and engage with individuals that are different from us. We learn from each other, and it also makes the conversations rich and very meaningful. Now, traditionally, when I look at research, I've always thought about two groups. We have our researchers, and then we have us, the patients, the community. And the thing is, we can't function without each other. We as patients, as SMEs, we need the researchers to do innovative treatment methods. And they also need us. They need our feedback and our input. So it's actually kind of this partnership, this co-learning relationship. And I love this picture. I love this picture because in there, I'm sitting not as a patient. I'm not in there to say my story or some of my struggles in the healthcare system. I'm in there with some very well-known people in the bleeding disorder community, and I'm sharing a panel as a colleague, as a partner, and my input and my thoughts and opinions are valued equally as some of those other individuals. So I really appreciate that picture because I feel like it really portrays what we're trying to do is like this back and forth, like learning from each other partnership. So when I was preparing this slide, my husband, who works in tech in insurance company, kind of peeked over my shoulder and he's like, wait a minute, like, are you a SME? And in his industry, subject matter experts are called SMEs. And I told him, like, well, I mean, it depends. Like, what do you define as a subject matter expert? And he's like, well, you know, it's somebody who brings knowledge or experience in a particular area. They helps us kind of solve problems, and they help us look at things through a different lens. And I like that statement because that's exactly what we're trying to do. And I told him, like, then yes, by your definition, I am a SME, a subject matter expert, an SME. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to help researchers kind of look at things through our lens, through our lived experience. And it's all of us who have a bleeding disorder, our caregiver, our friends, all of us are subject matter experts, and we have something important to bring and to say. Because our lived experience, it can't be taught. So we have to help others see like what we're going through to kind of help guide research. So my journey from patient to subject matter expert began over 20 years ago when I met Dr. Valentino. And I met him at a point in my life. It was a very challenging point. I was really frustrated with the healthcare system. I was really frustrated with the hematologist that I was working with. I couldn't get the answers that I was looking for. So I vigorously was like searching on the internet, and I found him. And I mean, I remember our first interaction. I mean, he's seen hundreds of patients, so I'm not sure if he remembers, but I remember seeing like his non-verbal body language, and I remember how empathetic he was. And as somebody who grew up in the healthcare system and spent a lot of childhood in the hospital system, I know when a person cares. I know when a person is really invested in our treatments, despite all the stressors that a healthcare system can provide to a healthcare provider. And I feel like at that point, he also took off his like expert hat and he placed it on me, and he kind of let me take charge a little bit of my plan of care. And if I had questions, I mean, he answered them. And I feel that's kind of where my journey began. We kept in touch throughout the years. He moved on and evolved into other roles. And then about a year and a half ago, he reached out to me and we caught up, and he asked me like, hey, I have a role for you in the NHF. It was super exciting. He started talking about the SOS and the National Research Blueprint. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, to be honest. But I mean, I said yes without hesitating. And I said yes. I was so excited. I was making dinner. I almost burned my tortilla. But it's been a really wonderful journey. I've met some important people. So the picture on your left, and I like how life sometimes makes a complete circle. That's Donna DeMichele, who was my pediatric hematologist. And it's nice to see that, I mean, I went from a patient to a colleague. I went from somebody who's kind of been very passive in like plan of care into somebody who's a little bit more active and more involved. And I've been part of the SOS. Then I met Kevin, who invited me to the National Research Blueprint. And I was in a panel, and somebody asked me a question like, what is it that you want to see differently? And I just remember answering like, you know what, it would be nice if people would meet us in our community so they can see some of the challenges that we have to live through, issues with transportation or traveling far for HTC. And Kevin, I didn't know who Kevin was, reached out to me. He's like, you know what, I'm gonna pick up on your offer. I'm gonna go where you're at. And it was during COVID, so there was a lot of restaurants that were not open. And I took Kevin to my community library. And my husband's like, because I didn't know who Kevin was, I didn't know his role. And I told my husband, I took the chief scientific officer to the Rudy Lozano library. And he's like, why would you do that? And I was like, well, it was either that or a living room. I didn't have another option. But that kind of showed me right there the commitment that he was making, that he saw me as somebody valuable enough that he was going to make the journey all the way to the south side of Chicago, to a neighborhood that probably he's never been to. And ever since then, I also kind of became part of the HEDI. I speak HEDI. I understand HEDI. Like, I live HEDI. I love that working group. And also, I'm kind of settling into my new role as a co-chair of the subject matter expert. That's a different role that I'm kind of getting used to, and it brings a new set of challenges. But I'm happy to be doing all this. It's taking me to different. My only regret is that I've never done something like this a lot earlier. And I feel that it's important to share our voice, because usually I identify myself as a woman, as Mexican, but I've never really identified myself as a female with like an ultra rare bleeding disorder. And it's not something that I easily disclose. And now I'm taking ownership of it. It has helped me understand that, you know what, if I'm going to be born with this, I want to do something good with it. I've also learned so much about clinical trials. I've learned all the different phases, and it's also kind of helped me understand some of the issues with doing research with ultra rare bleeding disorders. I think, you know, I always root for my hemophilia brothers and sisters when there's like a breakthrough in their treatment, but I kind of understand why sometimes maybe for glanzman's thrombasthenia, those options are not easily as available. But I'm learning so much about clinical research. I feel valued. I feel like a true colleague being a subject matter expert. I've been developing some wonderful relationships that have been professional and now a little bit more like personal and friendships. And I also kind of feel like I have this sense of responsibility. I know there's a lot of people who want to be involved, who want to be up here, but for whatever resources, maybe financial, they can't be here. They can't take time off work to participate in events from this. And I always keep them in the back of my mind. Like, what would they want to say? And I call them the unheard voices that I feel like we always have to consider. So why is it important that our voice be included? So the first one is obviously that our lived experience cannot be taught. I always say, like, I don't have an MD, I don't have a PhD, but I have a GT. And in our lived experience in med school and in grad school, it cannot be taught. And I say this also as a healthcare professional. When I work with my patients and I'm trying to understand them, it's difficult because I don't know what it's like to be in their shoes and live their life. And I borrow this quote from them. So I work with individuals with disabilities, and they have this beautiful quote that says, like, nothing about us without us. And sometimes when they express their frustrations with treatment or policy or insurance, I always tell them there's people out there making important decisions about your care and your quality of life without you. And if something matters to you, then you need to kind of speak up and get involved. So I started doing that because I feel the same way. And I want to make sure that my voice is heard. Another one is that we can help identify the healthcare needs of our communities. We all come from different parts of the country. We all have different issues. We have a common factor, a bleeding disorder, but our lived experience is a little bit different. So each of us can kind of bring in a little bit of that input to the conversation. If we participate in research, research becomes more meaningful to us. We understand it a little bit more. We understand, like, why we participated in something. And then the other point is that it kind of helps improve our healthcare outcomes and quality of life, which is another very important thing. And it's an important thing to kind of share with researchers our expectations and our concerns so they can kind of develop research ideas. So we have a lot to do in research. Traditionally, we participate in research and by maybe giving blood or maybe filling out a few surveys, but there's a lot more that we can do in research. One of them is we're beginning to understand, like, the research process. In our working group, that's one of the things that was very vocal, like, well, we need to even understand what research is like. What are the whole process, all the different steps from the beginning of an idea to kind of dissemination. Another thing we can do is we can contribute to research ideas in planning. If there's a research design, we can give input, like, well, you know what, if I was part of that research study, this is what might work or might not work, and how can we improve it a little bit better? We can help support with recruitment. And this is kind of a big one for me. I've been hearing that sometimes in some research studies, they have a difficult time recruiting people of color. There's the issue with trust. And I feel like I can play a role in kind of helping, going back to maybe, for example, like Latino communities, and kind of help them recruit them in research studies and explain, why is it important to participate in gene therapies? Sometimes when they hear it from somebody who doesn't have the same living experience, they're very hesitant to participate in research trials, and we can help with that as subject matter experts. Another thing we can do is we can help with the dissemination of research study results. One other thing that we've kind of learned is that us individuals with bleeding disorders, we want to understand research studies a little bit better in terms that are a little bit more digestible, because sometimes all this research lingo is a little bit different to understand, but we like to read like a research article, perhaps in a summarized format, where we can understand and appreciate those results. And we can kind of see, like, wow, like, I participated in this research study and this is the outcome of it. Another one is that we can help educate regarding healthcare inequities and social determinants of health. I think it's really important to understand some of the barriers when individuals want to participate in clinical trials. Gene therapies require a lot of commitment. It requires frequent appointments to the facilities, and some individuals, they can't take time off work, they don't have the flexibility in their schedule, or they're single parent households, and we can give input in that. When there's designing a research study, we can kind of help address some of those social determinants of health. And the last one, and I think it's a huge one, is just helping bring back the trust from the community so they can participate in research studies. So I want to leave you with some final thoughts. I want to give you some pearls that you can take with you. If you are a researcher and you're in the audience today, just kind of, I really want you to be aware of the power dynamics that you bring into a relationship. In the next few years, you're probably going to be working with a subject matter expert, and that subject matter expert may be somebody with an MD or a PhD, and you guys are going to understand each other well. You're going to speak the same language. The power dynamics is going to be pretty balanced. But perhaps you're going to be working with somebody who doesn't even have a college degree. And you got to be aware of the power you bring to that relationship and how maybe you can tip the power in your favor. For example, Kevin is so good at that. I mean, when I interact with Kevin, he does such a good job at balancing that power. And me as a subject matter expert, I don't feel intimidated. He does such a good job. I'm not sure if he knows he does that, if he's aware, but he does such a good job. And you have to be aware of your position when you're interacting with somebody who's a subject matter expert. Just remember that everybody with a bleeding disorder has something to contribute. And as a relationship evolves, they'll probably say more. Initially, it's a new role. This is a new thing for all of us. I'm even beginning to kind of understand what my role is. But as we become more comfortable and us as subject matter experts begin to interact more with researchers, we're going to have a lot to say. So make sure to always listen. And if they're quiet, kind of ask questions, because I'm guaranteed that they're going to have something to say. And the other one, for everybody, just please familiarize yourself with all the social determinants of health, how it impacts quality of health, access to care, and participation in research. And the very last point, always remember that meaningful change and engagement takes time. This is a process that we're all trying to learn, so we have to be patient as everybody kind of settles into their new roles. I think Kevin is going to say a few final words.
First and foremost, give me a hug.
See, like colleagues now, colleagues.
I think you can see why we love Esmeralda so much. I am so inspired every time I hear her talk. So thank you. Thank you for embarrassing me too. That was really terrific, and I think that really, from the first time I met Esmeralda, or that perspective really resonated with me, and I think she's really, more than a subject matter expert, more than a colleague. I mean, you're really a leader for us too. So thank you. I just wanted to close by a huge thanks to the working group chairs that have been working so hard on this. You've heard from Esmeralda; she's co-chairing the group. I see Aaron Sorelli in the back over there. A number of others in the room are participating in the groups. And the working group chairs, who are all listed here, have really done, yeoman's work in herding the cats and bringing this process together. Could not do it without them. Lots of work to do, but these are the folks that do the heavy lifting. And then I also wanted to thank the Blueprint Steering Committee. Many of these individuals are in the room now and have been with the process for a long time, really since the beginning. Absolutely no way we could implement these plans or succeed in this without this terrific group of really dedicated people. So I wanted to thank the working group chairs and the steering committee, maybe with a round of applause. So with that, we have a few minutes for a little bit of a panel discussion. So I'm going to invite some of our panelists to come up here on stage. Esmeralda, Len, Donna, and Michelle's coming up.
And I'm going to take the microphone. I think that one is for, yeah. So if anybody has any questions from the audience, and Tim is monitoring our chat, So if there's any virtual questions, please raise your hand. Samantha's got a microphone, and we do need to have you speak into the microphone because our virtual audience needs to be able to hear you. So even though you might be able to project well, we appreciate that very much. We do ask that you speak into the microphone.
And while Samantha works the room for questions, maybe we should do a round of introductions here too. I think probably this is a group that needs no introduction, but we should probably do it anyway.
That sounds wonderful. So we all know Kevin. We've met Kevin. We have Esmeralda, and we've met Esmeralda. Do you want to hand the microphone down? And maybe Dr. DeMcKelly can introduce herself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Donna DeMcKelly, and I'm a pediatric hematologist, a former Hemophilia Treatment Center director. I formerly also worked at the National Institutes of Health, stimulating research in all blood disorders, including hemophilia. And I'm very happy to be working now as a consultant back into the community. I'm so happy to be back into the community, working as a consultant, primarily on projects that stimulate research and stimulate workforce development. In other words, the people who, bringing people into the field who will continue to work on behalf of persons with bleeding disorders. So I'm really thrilled to be here and part of this project.
Thanks, Donna. So I'm Len Valentino. I'm the president and CEO at NHF. I'm also a pediatric hematologist. And this woman is my mentor and idol. And I've always looked up to her.
Just tells you how old I am.
Not really. So, when this whole process started, the charge that the NHF board gave me was figure out how to bring NHF a research program, bring us, research. I don't think they really understood what they wanted, which was great because that sort of left the slate somewhat open. What was the first thing I did? I went to Donna and we talked about it and what that could mean. And this was actually even before I accepted the role, because I knew that she had done this before. She really led a highly successful state of the science building a program for hemophilia and inhibitors and really understanding the whole scientific issues and creating a plan. The problem was there was no money to implement the plan, and only recently has part of that plan actually been implemented. But I knew that she knew how to do this. So that was really the first step. And then putting together sort of the pieces like Esmeralda and bringing in subject matter experts was critical. So, the board had a goal. I gave them a vision of what that goal could look like. And then I'm fortunate to have had people who could put the pieces into place, including Donna and Esmeralda, and importantly, Kevin and Michelle, because without them, we could have not gotten it to this point. But I'll make a plea. We can't continue to move forward without another really important piece, and that's all of you. And it's more than all of you, it's everybody in our community needs to get on board with this. So whether you're in a chapter or in an HTC or in industry, this is our future. These are the questions that people identified in the community. These are the gaps in care that were identified by community members, not NHF. I didn't design these questions. These were your questions. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us in this room now to go recruit everybody else to start participating, get involved in this. And I'm sure we'll hear more about ways that people can get involved as we move forward. So that's my introduction.
I think we have a question over here.
Hi, so I have been in the community for probably 15 years, and I've known Michelle and Maria for a large part of that time. The four of you are new to my world, and my world has changed with each and every one of you who came into it. When Len came on as the new CEO, president of the chapter or the organization, and he had this new initiative for research, I wanted to do cartwheels. I was so excited. And then I had the pleasure to meet Kevin, who I had no idea how sophisticated and educated and knowledgeable he was because he spoke to me on my level so that I could understand what he had to say. I met Esmeralda, and Esmeralda changed my world because we were the National Hemophilia Foundation. We were hemophilia. I was so anti anything other than hemophilia. You know what? Esmeralda changed me, and now I'm all about us being so much more inclusive and the whole bleeding disorders community. And I can't say enough about Dr. Dee McKelly, but to my point, with the research blueprint, after all that, with the research blueprint, Kevin, one of your first slides talked about the state of science, and you said so many global partners, I don't know if it was industry that you had indicated, but when we're doing this and being part of the SME group, the industry partners, the pharmas, they do so much of the research for us. What is the thought process on maybe bringing them in a little bit to our working groups? I know that we've always been very divisive and, pharma's here, we're here. We don't want to blur the lines. There's ethics, there's this, there's that. However, if they're the ones who are doing the research, what's the thought process on whether or not we bring them into the fold or don't?
That's a terrific question, and I appreciate that. And it's true that pharma and biotech companies are where the work is happening, right? Where much of that research is happening. Not all of it, but much of it is happening there. And as a result, the industry is a critical member of the community, right? And a constituency that needs to be involved in this process, and one that we as NHF also need to serve in the ultimate service of patients, of SMEs. So I didn't really speak to it, but on one of those slides, that highlights the working groups, you'll note that industry is actually in there and are very much part of the conversation. We don't necessarily have so many industry representatives embedded in those working groups, and part of that is because there's sort of limited space in those working groups, and there's a lot of expertise in industry that we could bring in, but we are for sure engaging those people in the process and being informed by those needs and pressures, and there's kind of a virtuous cycle to that there's a feedback loop there. But you highlight, I think, something that's critical, that they're essential stakeholders in this as well.
And if I might add, when we did this State of the Science, we had 6 working groups, and some of them ranged in membership from maybe 10 people to over 30. And we wanted to make sure that within each of those working groups, there was representation of SMEs, of chapters, of the Hemophilia Treatment Center, and the different multidisciplinary teams. So physicians, nurses, physical therapists, genetic counselors, all of the people that you see when you go to a treatment center, external experts who might bring something relevant to that specific working group. And then we also did include industry. Every working group had an industry member. Now, every industry would want to be involved in every working group, but we had to be very selective. We looked at what could they bring to that specific working group that would be of value to the working group. Our purpose was not, and this might sound very rude, but our purpose was not to bring value to them. Our purpose was to have the value come to the working group and the work that we're doing. And so we were very selective. Sometimes some people got a little angry because they had certain people that they wanted in certain working groups, and we were not able to accommodate that because of the numbers that we had. And we were looking for certain expertise. So we did have industry representation. And we also had other patient organizations, advocacy organizations were included. So we really tried to be very comprehensive. We tried to look at who is the community. And the community is not just NHF. We wanted to expand and be very comprehensive. As Len said, we wanted to understand what were the community's needs and make sure that the community was represented in every way that we could think of. So we looked at gender, we looked at age, we looked at race, geographic location, all of those different things. We had people from Europe, Canada, on
So,
our
Michelle, I
on our
want
list.
to sort of on that note about community, and I think building on that question about who was involved and how are they involved, I have a question that I actually want to direct to Esmeralda, which is, there's probably people in the room here who may have an interest in being involved in sort of research, but no idea how to do it, to get started. So as somebody who's sort of made that journey, what would you recommend to the person who, is a member of the community that wants to be involved in research but doesn't know where to begin? And then I think the part two of that question is, how would you advise us, NHF, Research Department, Kevin Mills, to engage with folks that really want to get involved?
We're trying to figure that out. It's a little challenging because I feel like everybody who has the ability to participate is already trying. They reach out on their own. I feel if we get in touch with somebody from the community, they can serve like as a liaison to kind of get them involved. So for example, today I'm bilingual, so I speak Spanish, and there were some great sessions that I want to be present, but I chose to be with the Spanish speaking group to kind of get to know them, to build that trust, to kind of get them in and kind of get their perspective. So reaching out, identifying members in the community and somehow reach out to them we're talking about maybe using also social media, and we're going to be working very closely with community engagement to see how else we can reach individuals who want to participate, but they can't come here, they can't attend the meetings. We're doing everything Zoom right now to make things more accessible. So we're trying to figure out different options. And I really want to somehow get in touch with the unheard voices. And those matter to me because they probably want to participate and they can't be here.
I think there was a question in the back of the room, Sam.
Hi, I'm Dan Lytle. I'm from West Virginia. I'm the bridge. I'm a researcher and a person with a severe bleeding disorder. And I think what's missing, the stakeholders are missing, are the scientists that are not in medicine, nursing, physical therapy. I'm a sociologist. You're leaving out this group who has knowledge of community, how community work, how they interact. I think we need to reach out to them also and bring them into the fold and teach them about hemophilia and teach them what it means to be part of that community so they can research more of the community. I mean, I just finished a research project on pediatric hemophilia as it relates to sociology, not medicine. And there's more information out there that needs to be gleaned that's not there. It's not in the literature. I've looked. So.
Yeah, thanks for your comment, Dan. I think that's a critical point because one of the real important steps that we need to take is, we talk about access as sort of the critical component to innovation. In terms of research, the critical component to pair with that is implementation. And, we need to understand how to implement research in communities. And exactly what you're saying needs to be incorporated in as we begin to think about sort of phase 3, which is how do we now implement? We've got an implementation group that's sort of embedded in here, but we need to build that out more in a more thorough and dynamic way to understand how can this then be driven into the community and be of value to the people who need it most.
I think that's a wonderful point. In my professional work, I work with a lot of community engagement, and they usually have a sociology background or psychology, community psych, and they do a lot of like community participatory research. They do community outreach, and they have a very particular skill set that they bring. So we're going to be meeting with the other groups in September, and that's one of the things that I really want to discuss with the community engagement. Like, how do we do community engagement more effectively? Did it go off?
No, it's good.
Okay. To make sure that we can really get into those communities and reach out.
Another question?
Yes, thank you so much. It's been a great session so far. And speaking about how we get involved, right, as patients. I'm a heme severe patient, and I have some symptoms that are not typical, right? And of in terms of how I respond to, say, certain medications, recombinant medications, and when looking towards communicating that to my provider, it's one thing that they can help me, and it's another for that information then to be shared with the wider research community and how that takes place without, say, formally being in a clinical trial or an observational study. And then also, what accountability they have to actually share that information. So, here I am thinking, okay, I want to communicate this to people. Where do I go to share this experience so that it can then be looked at, maybe, more genotype testing, right, for hemophilia or, all bleeding disorders, right, and how those genotypes affect responses to certain medications. So, I'm just looking for some guidance.
Well, there are a couple of places. First off, of course, always share with your provider. You always have the opportunity to go to the FDA and put in information through the FDA about what you might consider to be an adverse event to a medication or something like that. So you can report that yourself. From the perspective of data gathering within the community, there's Athen, and you do that. That's actually provider information that's gathered through your treatment center. And if you participate in Athen, they're gathering and sharing that information with, they're gathering that information through your visits, your comprehensive visits, and sharing that with Athen. And CDC counts. But then we also have community voices in research, and that's called CVR. It's a little bit different, and I shouldn't say a little bit different, it's quite different than Athen or CDC counts, because it really gathers that information about your journey. And it asks many different questions than normal. Now, we don't necessarily ask about things like medication reactions and things like that, but that doesn't mean we can't in the future. And so giving your input to us as to what should we be asking? Is there a gap there? We're actually pretty flexible. We're going to be changing our platform vendor soon and really looking at what types of surveys or what types of questions should we be asking the community. And if that's a gap that you're not seeing somewhere else, and please reach out to us. I mean, we know each other. Reach out and say, hey, I think this is something that would be of interest. And it would be something that we would include and incorporate. So thank you for that.
We have 1 minute left, Michelle.
All right.
Yeah, and if there's no other question, then I'd actually like to add to that as well.
Yes, please.
But you see, that's a prime example of how you can influence the course of research. So yesterday we were in a session where we talked about, research taking very many different forms. It's not just clinical trials and observational studies. Registries, surveillance is a very important part of information gathering, especially in rare diseases. So one of the ways that you might be able to influence the course of research and help us to understand unusual medication reactions, for instance, is if registries like Athen, and you addressed it with
CVR.
Yes. And if these data gathering tools are not gathering that specific information, then that's where you come in and say, wait a minute, there's no place for me to put that information in there. There's no place for anyone else to put that information in there. There may be medication reactions that may be going on all over the place, but it's a one-off here and a one-off there. And that's where aggregate data becomes extremely important in helping us understand not only what's going on with rarer disorders where, not everybody is highly represented in every center, but also to help us understand our blind spots, what we might be missing, and where research potentially needs to be heading. So I think what you brought up is a prime example of how you, as a subject matter expert, can begin to influence the course of research. So thank you for bringing up that point.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Our time is up. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate your questions. If you will, please fill out your evaluation. Every day they have a $75, actually several $75 gift cards that they give away. And you just need to watch your app to see if you won one. And we really encourage you to stop by our booth, the NHF booth in the exhibit hall, and sign up for CBR so that we can understand your journey. It offers many opportunities for you above and beyond you giving information to us. We try to really engage you in opportunities to give your information to others, to share your information and be engaged in many different stages of research. So talk to us and hear about that at our booth. Thank you. And thank you to all of our Blueprint members who are out here for all of the time and energy that they have put into the Blueprint and research.